All right, so hi and welcome. This is Ming. I'm the co-producer and director of this documentary. And this movie was made by Sylvia Danchev and me, though today I'm just here by myself, but together with Leo from Vogoma, he's going to be the host. And we're going to talk about this movie. So, hi, Leo.
Hey, my name is Leo, and I'll be helping Ming out in this director commentary session.
All right. So we've been starting this movie with a kind of intro that's not supposed to be religious, but more like a fairy tale, to get the movie started in a smooth way. And yeah, maybe just a little bit on the background about my role in this whole making. Um, so I would say I'm the technician behind this whole movie. So I've been doing all the shots, the visuals, the audio recordings, the editing, the animations, and also part of the music. And the content was more done by Sylvia Danchev. She's actually the writer, and she has been doing most of the research for the movie. And the movie has been starting out by Sylvia having a very personal experience with crystals and kind of had experienced something that she couldn't quite explain, and it made her start to wonder about this whole topic and why all of a sudden she felt so fascinated and so called by crystals and gemstones. And so she was starting to do the research and she had a bunch of questions, and so she went deeper and deeper into the topic. And at a certain point she asked me like, um, how about we make a movie project out of that? Because at that time, I was doing movies. I was learning the craft, so I knew all the the technical side of things. And then we decided to, yeah, let's make this whole thing the movie project. That's how it started. And it took us all in all about 3 years, over 3 years, from the first decision to the finished movie. And it was quite a journey because at the beginning we had a lot of research to do. There was a tremendous amount of information that you can get today on the internet. So basically, we've been looking through websites, books, videos, just to gather a huge amount of information about that topic. And then the second step was to filter out everything, just to make decisions on what are we going to keep in and what are we going to throw out. So in the end, we have been contacting a bunch of people, experts, and the ones we've decided to keep in the movie, well, you see them in the movie. These are the six experts. They're all from the German-speaking countries in Central Europe, and each of them has a really sophisticated background in a specific area concerning the crystals and the gems. So as you can see here, they're introduced now, most of them. Yeah, so this is how the whole project started. And I guess, because sometimes I hear people say that, oh, the whole movie is, very Western, or just mentioning mostly, the European or German background. And well, I can say that's the case because it is a German production. So our focus is pretty much from the Western perspective, and also our interviewees, they're all from Germany. So we didn't include, I mean, the history about crystals and gems is very rich. So and they played a role all over the world, and we decided to put our focus on European history. And I'm sure there is a lot that can be said about gemstone that were discovered in in different continents, different countries who played a big role in the different cultures. And I think what I'm trying to say here is that the information does not exclude any other truth, timeline, culture. It's just a focus that we were working with. That's the material that we found had really good content that we wanted to implement in this movie. And also, a word I want to say that uh, I'm the I am not a expert myself on crystals and gemstones. So I've been learning a lot by meeting all these people and doing interviews with them. But I think if anyone really wants to get deep into the topic of crystals or crystal healing or how they work on the scientific side of things, on the spiritual side of things, I invite you to have a look on our website, because on the website we have a link to all the websites of the experts, and they have really much more information on the different topics in depth. And the website is, I think it's in the link, it's crystalvisions-film.com. So you can go there and find all the informations and links if you're really interested to go deeper on the different topics. Yeah, and also our our initial idea um, of just basically asking different question and following the question led us actually to a point where we realized that there are really very different approaches to the whole topic, and there is, let's say, a very scientific uh, approach, and as you can see in these shots here, also very spiritual approaches. And we have been meeting these people who were very open and who said that both sides are very important. So we have been trying to implement this also in the movie, which means creating a balance, which basically takes care of the scientific side of things. So we're sure that all this is not, just some made up new age stuff, but also we've been taking care of the spiritual side of things, which is much more subjective, which is metaphysical. And funnily enough, we have been getting comments from different people, and some say that, "Gosh, your movie is way too spiritual. I really, I don't believe all this. I'm a scientist, or you know, I believe in science." And other people say, "Your movie is way too scientific." So I think somehow we just have both sides in the movie. And of course, everyone has to see and feel how they best relate to that. Yeah, so here, right now, Donald, he's talking about that people are, just somehow attracted and called by the stone. And this whole chapter here is actually just the introduction. It's basically bringing up all the questions that Sylvia had, many questions that I had when I started to really, you know, engage with the crystals. And I think questions that a lot of people have, that a lot of people wonder about. So basically, in this chapter, we're just bringing in all the questions. And I think some of the main questions is why are people so fascinated by crystals? What aspect? Why are they called? Is it just the beauty, or is it more, and so on? And with these questions, we just started to go and also ask all these experts, what do you think about that? What is your own experience? And some people, like for example, this guy Wolfgang Hall, he has been teaching like thousands of people, thousands of students. So they can make sometimes some really meaningful conclusions. Yeah, and here Donald's talking about again about this, let's say, a personal quest about looking for different ways to relate with life. And I think it's quite a different approach if you have something, let's say a very personal point of view, a personal calling to that topic, then it's very subjective. And um, this, let's say the scientific side of things comes secondary because you want to find out something for yourself. So it's not only about the crystals, but it's about yourself and your own experience. Whereas, I see that some people who are more relating with the world or with the crystals in a very rational way, it's a completely different approach. That's more about like, okay, is that real? Is it measurable? Is it scientific? Is it explainable? And it's more objective. Like, can you prove that this is actually real? And I think it's quite a different way of approaching this topic.
I think the time has come for all of us because we only have one path of development available to us now, namely the spiritual one. We want to know why, how, where. The material world cannot satisfy us anymore. And now the movement that asks this question has grown very big. Today we have developed with our thinking.
Yeah, here he's talking, Lucas is his name. He's talking about, that kind of the consciousness and the paradigm of people are shifting. And how this shift and this new understanding also brings up a lot of new questions. And within this change, this shift, crystals suddenly come into play again, and they have almost a different role than they had before in the period of time before. Okay, so that was pretty much the introduction, and here we're getting into the first chapter of how the crystals and gemstones are actually created. Like the very, let's say, fundamental information and topic, like how are they actually made? And it's really fascinating because a lot of information that we've been learning, I didn't know, and it's really mind-blowing. If you go into these caves and you see this crevices of crystals, these holes of crystals, and then you see information next to it. It says something like 200 million years old, 300 million years old. I mean, this is kind of a time period that we cannot imagine. 300 million years old. Just to imagine what kind of time it was when these crystals has been starting to form. It's completely mind-blowing.
Ancient beings who are here on Earth, who are still in their original body, which is not destructible, which does not decay.
Yeah. And here Wolfgang is talking about basically how the crystals are made and how metaphorical it can be to the creation process, of a being, of a human being, that there are a bunch of similarities.
And it is amazing when going through the relevant literature how metaphysical it reads. It begins at conception, one can say, in a crevice, in a cavity in the rock, in the mountains. It is often tension joints that have been dragged into a vacuole. Steaming hydrothermal fumes.
Did you do these animations?
Energetic, pressurized, and heated.
Yeah, absolutely. I did all these animations. These, for example, this one's shot that I made in the cave, and then I just put the different animations to simulate the liquid in which the crystals formed. And actually, funnily, for the shots, you will see that in a second. I bought a how's it called, like a chemical experimental box where you can grow your own crystals. So it's basically for for kids or for studies, and you have a little box with different chemicals and you can just grow them. So I've been doing that shot, for example, and then I've been putting a camera on it, and I've been recording in time lapse for I think 12 hours, 16 hours or something.
If such a seedling
So it
falls
was
into
quite
the
fun, but it
agricultural
also
medium in this way,
took a lot of
it
time,
will
to do
automatically
some also
continue
single
to grow
shots.
like this. Then that determines its direction of growth and represents something of a genetic trait which leads it.
Oh, the previous shot was also a 3D animation that I did, and these shots are actually of obviously real shots that we did in the cave, and it was really amazing. It's a cave. It's in a German city. In Germany, there's like one city. It's called the city of Gemstones, the city of crystals. It's called Ida Oberstein because I think some of the biggest crystal mines in Germany are there, and so the whole city, from I don't know, historical times like hundreds of years ago, all the city and all the businesses were forming around this crystal mining. And still today, you have like a majority of businesses in the city has something to do about crystals and gems. So we went there, and they have two museums there, and they have this cave that turned into a museum. And I've been doing a lot of shots there, including these shots here. And it was quite an experience to actually see how these crystal cavities are, how they look like,
It could be
in the
considered
mountain, in the
sacred
stone.
to mine these precious
It's the first time I
stones,
saw that
to
actually.
cut them from the mother lode to which they were connected for eons.
And it's
Their
also a little
wonderful
bit
beauty, though, is not
it's
fully
really
revealed
strange to
until they
see
reach the
because
sunlight.
you realize that
It
all
is
these
also by a
crystals that we
coincidence
find very
when water
beautiful,
and
they're
erosion
actually just in
bring
the
gems to
earth.
the surface
They're like
that the
under
deposit is
tons
found.
and meters of
Sometimes
rock
they
and
are
stone,
discovered
and they're
while
just in the
mining for
dark and
coarser stones.
completely invisible.
Michael Vogt is a geologist,
Okay,
explorer, and
so
expert
here we're
not only for
into the next
precious
chapter,
stones. We
and
will
in this
accompany him
chapter
to a
we are
devastating
following
mine of
the
Atlantis,
geologist,
where he
Michael
retrieves
Vogt is
the
his name.
stones from near the surface.
He is a geologist, and he really goes out. He goes to the really remote places to dig for crystals.
The place to which we're now going
So
is located
this
in the
time
woods.
we've been following
It
him
was
to a
once a
place
quarry,
that was
embedded
not
and
too
buried
far,
by
like I think
layers
2 or
of
3 hours
phosphate and
drive from his
silicium.
home. And we've been going into the mountains to dig up some crystals. So it was very exciting. Also, the whole day was just foggy
Gems can
and
get to the
very
surface in
mysterious.
various ways.
The atmosphere was
On one
it
hand, by
it really
weathering
felt
and
like a
erosion,
treasure hunt.
then also by landslides when a mountain breaks away.
Yeah, and the walk to the to the place
Weathering
was
also
really kind
often
of a
reveals the
meditation.
gems on the
Everything was
surface
so
that
quiet
are
and
very, very hard and have separated from
atmospheric,
the
and
host rock,
we're just walking
which has
there for I
eroded
don't know
away.
an hour into the forest, and
This means
was
that we
really
can
a
collect the gems
kind of a
and
meditative
identify
state.
deposits in this way. Furthermore, gems accumulate mainly in rivers.
Yeah, and this guy, he also
The
he has a
creation of
shop
the
in
gems
his
must
home. So
continuously
basically,
occur all the time,
the first
owing to
floor of his
various
home
geological
is just a
activities in the
big
Earth's
crystal
crust.
shop,
We
and
have to examine closely
many of
how
the
is the gem formed
crystals and gems and
and then
fossils
work with the
he has
surrounding
been
rock,
digging out himself.
and
So
then
he's
can,
going
of
different
course,
places
draw
all over the
conclusions on
world,
the age.
and
We could
digging
be off
for
by 1
crystals and
year
bringing them
or
home, and
100,000 years, though.
um, selling them in his own shop or to other merchants. It's really was really interesting to just to meet him and go on this trip and to see how it looks like when a geologist goes out for some treasure hunt.
And this compacted rock, which contains this geode, when it cools down slowly, if during in a period of 50 to 100,000
Yeah, and here he has been talking about how the stones are basically created, and it's similar than, let's say, any crystallization process, but for the crystals that we're talking about has to be under very specific conditions in the earth, like at certain temperatures, with a certain amount of pressure, and of course the existence of certain chemicals. And then there's a process of cool down, where basically the the water, or the contained minerals are cooling down, and then the crystallization process takes place. And it actually takes place all the time, like everywhere in the earth are probably here and there are these conditions, so crystals are created permanently. Then some of them, they come to the surface, or they're mined, but it's a constant process. So here we have arrived at the site. It's basically just one big site, and also everything is just covered by earth and dirt and leaves. So he's like, okay, if you really want to dig in, you you probably need a few hours just to dig like 2 meters, 3 meters in. So
The mystical aura of the
yeah,
autumn
we're just
forest
trying to find a
and the
spot where we
strange,
could
unreal sound
get
of hammers
something.
and picks through the fog remind me of a treasure hunt as in a fairy tale from childhood. For a moment I worry we might awaken the spirit of the mountain.
So in one of the rocks, we found this crystalline structure, and this is Celestine.
Even in its raw,
So that's how it
unpolished
looks
form,
when it's
the
raw
crystal is full of
Celestine.
beauty. Its full beauty
And
is
here's
oddly
here's a
raised
shot. It's
by
from
human
a
hand,
different
though.
location. That's
The
one
art
of
of
the
cutting and polishing
oldest,
gems
not the oldest,
requires
but one of
mastery
the
and love
remaining
for this special
old-fashioned
material.
crystal
Someone
grinders in
says,
Germany.
for
That's
its
like the last of
potential
its
is
kind.
what
It's
turns
really
a
how
raw
people have
stone
been
into a
working
work of art.
100 years ago or 200 years ago. But basically, you see this raw crystals that are being found and mined out of the earth, and some of them go to this kind of places where they are basically cut and grinded and polished. And this place is just, it's really like a historical, it should be a historical museum, but this guy is really still working like this. It has such a charm, such a flair, this place. And he was also he was all proud, when we were there with the cameras, and he showed us around, and he was all proud to show us, every machine, every detail. And the fascinating thing is everything is powered by water. So there's a little creek outside, and there's a big, water wheel that powers the whole little hut, the whole workshop. Even the lights were powered by water, so it's quite impressive. Okay, these shots are from a different location. That's basically a modern workshop, and this is the private workshop of Lucas, the guy you see here. He has a little workshop of his own where he basically has all the tools to work with crystals. These shots are from a museum. These shots are from the museum in the city I mentioned in Germany, Ida Oberstein. And that's just amazing. I mean, there are some pieces where you think that's crazy what people do.
The study of the healing properties of crystals in Germany is mostly due to his work.
We can examine the development of modern crystal healing therapy. Today, so many different
All right,
sources,
so now we're into the
scientific
next
as well
chapter.
as spiritual, are available.
And this chapter is very much
This
about
has allowed crystal healing medicine
gemstone
to develop
healing
in the
or
last
gemstone
40
in
years
relationship with
in
human.
ways that were
And
previously
you
not
can see
possible,
that this person,
in
Michael
ways
Ginga,
that combine different fields of
it's
knowledge,
mainly
not
based on
just
his work.
examining scientifically
And
any
in
spirit,
case you don't
but
know
in
this
a
person,
holistic
Michael
way
Ginga, he
that
is,
benefits
I would
humans.
say, one of the most important people in German literature about crystals, because he has
Modern
been
crystal healing has
doing
taken very
huge
different paths
studies, and he's
worldwide.
been dedicating his
The
whole
starting
life on this
point
topic. And
clearly was
he's
the
he's
United
really
States.
he's brought out
Crystal
really
healing was
sophisticated
only
books about
revived
this topic.
because Indian knowledge was
And
passed on to white
he's
people.
was just
But
really
his
amazing to
authors like
meet him
Katrina
because he's such
Raphael,
an open-minded
Jane
person.
M.
He's
Dow,
totally
and
critical
Dara
in the sense
Salai
of
Chokran, who
scientific.
all learned
So
from the
he's really
shamans
using
and
the
have then
knowledge,
translated it into our
facts, and
Western
scientific
perspective.
approach to verify
So there is a
everything.
branch that is based
But
on
at the same time,
tradition
he's also
that has
very
been passed down
intuitive.
for
So
centuries.
he's really
Channel
combining
knowledge
this
was
two
added
sides.
to
And
this
he
pretty quickly,
also he
both
says,
in the
which
US and to
I
some
think is really
extent in
important,
Europe.
that
But the focus
it's
here was
about
the
bringing
United
together
States.
the scientific
This
approach and
stems, for
the
example,
spiritual
from
approach, and really
Garuda,
to see, okay, how
who
can
has
we
written
draw
about gem
conclusions
elixirs
from
and
all
where
this,
knowledge was
from the different
drawn
knowledges,
directly from spiritual sources.
the different
I
perspective,
personally
and
do
how
not
can we
do that,
actually draw
so I cannot
something
say
out of
much
all this
about
that
that.
really
But
benefits our lives
interestingly enough, in the
concretely.
case of Garudas, it was applicable.
So he
So
has been
that they
dedicating
brought
really
in
his life
things that have turned
doing
out to be
research,
true.
writing books, collecting gems.
Here
And
in Europe,
for example,
we would
something he
actually have to
told us,
say
which I think is
in
a very
German-speaking
interesting
countries, we have done it a
information
different
that's
way
not in the movie,
because
is
we had
that they have been
homeopathy as our
doing
model.
tests
The different fields
with
have
stones
fertilized each other,
with up to 300
and
people. So
naturally,
they really
with
have
what
these
others
kind
have
of
done,
anonymous test
what
groups,
knowledge others have
and they
gained.
would hand out, for example, they say,
Ultimately,
okay,
what
now
works well
we want to
and can
test a
be
certain
repeated
stone. So they would
determines what
take
is
that
used,
stone and give it
whether it comes
to
from
300
traditional
different people,
sources, from
and these
channeling,
people, they don't
or if it
necessarily know
comes
about
from
each
our
other.
more analytical
They
work.
just know that they're
I am
part
also very
of a
pleased to
study.
say
And these
that no
people are
boundaries were
supposed to
created,
basically
but that
carry
there
the
was
stone with them,
communication
or
and
use them in a
mutual
special way, or
fertilization
just, I don't
and
know,
respect for each
I
other's
think they have
nature
some
for
instructions.
the sake of results.
And then these people are just
We could
supposed to,
say
over
quite
a
simply,
time period
who
of
heals
weeks
is
or
right.
months, to observe um, what they perceive. So basically, what they
Analytical crystal healing
how do
is the
they
attempt to
perceive
bring
this
all the
crystal or
different
gem
fields
has an
in an
effect on
organized
them.
system.
Then they're supposed
Therefore,
to
they
write down
take
their
themselves
experiences.
as a reference
And
point. Their
afterwards, they
origin,
would
their
collect
structure, their
all
cause,
these
their
reports
minerals,
from
and
200
try
to
to look
300 people
what
and make an
effects go back
evaluation.
to what origin.
And he says it's
If
really
stones
astounding
with
that
similar
the
color have a
majority, like
similar effect, then it must have
80% or
something to
something,
do with
would
the
have
color.
the
Or if
similar kind of
stones with
experience.
similar structure have a
So
similar
this is
effect,
how they,
it must have something to do
conduct
with the
big scale
structure.
studies,
It was not
and
certain
also
from
where
the
things can
beginning
be
that it would
verified.
work. It was an attempt to
So
organize
it's
things
quite
by their
similar
effect
also
and to
when
investigate, but it has been
new
confirmed
kinds of
greatly in
medicine
practice.
or pharmacy are
Because
produced
analytical crystal
and tested.
healing
So you
has
have
thus
like big
become a system,
groups or
it goes
anonymous
more
groups
order
where
than, for
certain
example,
substances are tested.
homeopathy or other systems.
So I think
We
this
don't have to
scientific
memorize the
approach is really
therapeutic
important and
properties
really
of
makes sense,
individual
because
stones. We
sometimes when you
only
make
need to
some,
understand
let's
the
say,
basics,
conclusions or statements,
and
it
we
can
could
be
then
true, but
deduce from the
only in certain
basics
conditions,
which
only
effect
for
the
certain
stone could
people.
have.
So
I
this
purposely
big
say
scale
could
of kind of
because
study
we can
or
never predict
experiments
with
can
certainty.
really show that,
There are
okay,
basically four
this
major
is really
factors
true
that have a
for
role
the
in the effect
majority
of
of people, or
stones.
for a certain
The color, of course,
percentage
is
of
the most
people.
obvious factor, and that colors have an effect is also well known. Also, every element, every mineral brings its own effect. Iron brings up
So here
completely
basically
different
he talks
qualities in
about
a
the different
stone
conclusions
than
that they've been
magnesium or
making through the
calcium.
studies
The third
about
aspect
which
is the
element
structure of
of
the
the
stone,
crystals
how the pieces are
actually
arranged,
have an effect
and
at
what
all.
forms they give
And
as crystals.
from their
And the
conclusions,
fourth element
they
is
say
the
that
process of creation.
they're the four
I
factors,
think
which
it's
he explains there in the
understandable
movie,
that a volcanically formed rock
but also
has a
that
completely different
the stones
power
have,
than a
the
stone
gems, they
that
have
is
a
formed by
um,
weathering and deposition.
effect on people in general, but of course it can be different from individual to individual.
Determine the effect of the stone, what it can be used for, and also to which people it fits best. We humans are indeed individuals, and not everyone
And he has
responds
been
to the stone in exactly the
writing
same
a
way.
few books,
These four
one of
factors
which
we
is
can
the
determine
lexicon
the
and like
by
an atlas
stone
of the
to
crystals.
the person
And
in very specific
it's
situation.
like the standard book in German-speaking countries. And later on, I also
Ineffective
found out
crystals
that
are
they
not
are
only explained by their specific
known in other
properties.
countries too. Like we've been
Humans,
talking with
with
the
all
people
their
from Healing
complexity,
Crystals from the U.S. and they all
constitution,
know. Oh yeah, Michael
ability
Ginger, we
to
know him. We
resonate,
have his
and their
books.
entire
So he's
bodily, mental, and
pretty well
emotional
known,
being
not only in
also
Europe.
always determine the kind of influence a crystal has and which process it will support.
Stones will affect people at all levels. Funnily enough, 20 years ago, when we started to do
And
research with stones,
there's
they were really
rather a
content
sad,
because there were people who said
sad
stones
news
are matter, so
that
therefore
Michael
they
Ginger,
won't
this
affect the
person,
body.
he passed
The
away
others said, wait a minute,
short
stones
1 year
work
after the
energetically,
movie has been
so
released.
that can
He
really
was
only
sick,
work on the mental and spiritual
and
level.
everyone
From
was
our
like,
own
oh yeah, I mean,
observations in
he's a
research
crystal
books and
expert and
also in
he will
natural
get
medicine
well, and
practice,
but he
we
has
can
something,
say
I'm
that
not sure
all
what he
levels
was,
are
but it was
affected.
something with his head or his brain.
Humans are not just
So
their physical
nobody knew how
body.
severe it
Their
was.
surrounding and penetrating
And
them
when he
are
passed
different
away in
energetic layers.
2014,
We can call them
was quite a
energy
shock for the
bodies.
whole community
That means there is an
because it was
energy
quite
body. It
surprising.
is called the etheric body,
And
which extends
well,
5 to
most
10
people felt it was a big
centimeters
loss
beyond
because
the
he was in
physical
the middle
body.
of
This etheric body
of
is like
writing
a
his
liquid.
second or third big book, was another collection, so he
All
was
the
not able to
organs
finish
that
it.
we have in the physical body, we can also find in the etheric body. The ethereal body supplies the physical
All right,
body
so
with
in
vital
this chapter
forces.
here, it's about
Additionally,
the
humans have
different
as spirit
the
soul
different
essence
subtle body
an
of the
emotional
human,
expression, an emotional
and
body,
it is
we
also
can
there to
say,
explain
because it is also
what
an
different
energy
levels
field which can be felt by
exist
people
in
who have
us,
subtle
as an
perception.
organism, and in the crystals on which interaction can take place. And I would say this is
Humans have a mental
part
body
of a
that is
paradigm
a body of thought that
that
goes beyond the emotional
I
body.
wouldn't say it's like
Some
post
spiritual traditions speak
science or a new
sometimes
age or
of
something,
other
because it's
spiritual
actually very
bodies,
scientific.
which I do not want
Because
to
the
explain
subtle
in detail
energies
now.
today are measurable. We have devices that can measure the subtle energies,
It's
or in
a
Chinese we
model
call
of
the
layers
qi.
which we find indicated
And
in so many books
in
do
that
not really
sense,
correspond
the
to the
effect
layers
of
we
crystals
see in
makes a lot
society,
more sense, because
but we
if you
have to
don't have this
imagine it as
concept
more
that
pervasive.
an organism can
The
have these
emotional
kind of
body is around us and in us as well,
fields,
and it
then
plays a
it's
major
very hard to
factor in our
believe or
physical
to
body,
understand why
which
a
is
piece
in
of
the
rock
Atlantis.
can affect you. But if you know that actually the rock has
And these bodies
field
are part
as
of our
well
everyday life.
that
We
interacts with the
constantly
human
think,
field, then
we
things
perceive
make a lot
things.
more sense.
We have our emotions that we spread around us. We have our physical vitality. And this body, or through these fields, we also
And also,
communicate and interact with the environment. That is
people
why
have been
we can
talking
feel
like, okay,
emotions with
can
others,
you somehow
attach
show
the
proof
thoughts of
that
others.
this
And of
exists, that
course,
these fields are
all these
real?
areas
And
can also
the
interact with
truth
stones,
is, today
because the
all this can
stones
be
have these fields
shown
too.
and measured. And also, for example,
The very
crystals,
factors of
especially
stones,
rock crystals,
color,
quartz crystals,
origin,
they are
structure,
used,
minerals,
you know,
altogether
they're
determine
using
the
technology.
information of the
And
stone,
some of the
so to
earliest
speak.
technology for an
And this
antenna
information is now
is
being
based on a rock
transferred to
crystal.
us
So
basically in two
I've seen
ways.
that some
Firstly,
of the
every
very
stone has
old
radiation.
antenna to
It
receive
absorbs
signals is
energy in
somehow they
hoops
just
and
took a
releases the energy
big
received at
crystal, rock
certain
crystal,
frequencies
and
again,
they wired a
which can
copper
then
wire
act
around
as
it,
a carrier
and
wave
then
for this
they
information,
put that
similar to
in,
radio
I don't know,
stations.
in
And secondly,
connection
each
with some
stone,
device, and you had an
everything
antenna. You
basically,
could really get
vibrates
radio
when it
signals
is
with that.
heated. And these vibrations
And
produce
also
sound waves.
quartz, they have a own, how do you call it, like a own pulsation,
That is, we have
their
to
own
imagine
rhythm.
that such a
And
crystal
this
is
rhythm has
steadily
been
clocked
used
at a certain
to
frequency. If
in the clocks. That's why some of the very famous clock, like watches, quartz, it's a brand, they're based on quartz crystals. And also from what I know, in our computers today, in the core, in the CPUs, you have crystals. You have silicon or quartz, um, very very pure, like silicon, and they are actually they're creating a rhythm. It's a hertz, and this is why we measure, in hertz, megahertz. That's the speed of the CPU, but this is based on crystal technology actually.
Which you get unlimited power. They only give an impulse, like an idea or an intention. We carry out this impulse with our own life energy. It is always through our own strength that it comes into motion and causes an effect. A stone can act on the spiritual level. It suddenly brings back memories.
Yeah, here the experts are talking about on which level crystals can have an effect on the human organism. And I think it's also good to know that, and also good to make the distinction that, some stones, they can have an effect on you on a very physical level, and some stones are even poisonous on the physical level. So it's not smart to put some poisonous crystals or minerals into water and drink that. So that's not a good idea. But at the same time, crystals, as I said, they have a field, so they create kind of vibration or a radiation around them, and that has, of course, also a direct effect on your body. And from what they have been studying, crystals can also have like more of a subtle metaphysical effect on people.
But it can also be very uncomfortable and painful. If old pain, old traumas need to come up again in order
and
to
also for
Consequently,
a few years ago, when these caves were discovered, I think it was called Nazca caves in Mexico, with this huge crystals. Don't know if you've seen them, Leo, pictures, with these huge crystals where people, they appear just like tiny. And they've been finding out that in these caves, these crystals have a very strong infrared radiation. So if people go in that cave for too long, they they would die because of the radiation. So it's very clear that crystals have radiation, and that has an effect on us. Yeah, and what Donald is talking about right here, I think is very significant, because he says our vocabulary is too limited, and I totally agree, because when I say energy, the word energy is so confusing, because energy has different meanings. Energy is a term that's used in physics, which will be also explained in a minute by the physicist. But we also say like energy in our body, but it's not exactly the same thing. So we have a very limited vocabulary, and we have like one word that actually describes 3 or 4 different things. So sometimes it can be very confusing. Yeah, this is exactly which this guy here, Walter Medinger, is talking about. So he is physicist, and he has been going into measuring subtle fields that have an effect on the human organism, mainly about electrosmog. So it is known today that some people, they are hypersensitive, they are oversensitive to electric fields, and they are more easily to get irritated or get sick when they're close to strong magnetic fields. And this guy, this physicist, he has been founding an institute that's specialized on measuring electromagnetic fields and their impact on the human organism. And in this scene here, he's actually explaining the difference between the term energy in the physical sense and energy, how it is used concerning human energy. And this is why, for example, we also borrow words like chi from Chinese culture,
rarity, and their
because it's a
specific
different word
elementary
and
and
it
physical
describes
properties
the,
distinguish them
let's say,
from
the
other
life
meanings
force that we
not
have in
only
us,
in
which is, by the way,
experience
also
but
measurable today.
also in their
Today,
possibility of
the chi is
application.
measurable. I've been seeing one device, also developed by a Chinese doctor in Germany, that with this device you can actually measure even the speed of chi that flows in your body.
It is used mostly for rock crystal. The word crystal describes nothing more than a geometrically
Okay, so
growing
this
form.
chapter we're
A
going
geometrically
into
growing
rock
form
crystals,
expresses
or
itself
the crystal
mathematically.
lattice, because rock
For
crystals
example, in a crystal, the
is
opposite
quite
surfaces
different from
are
other
always
gems,
parallel.
because rock crystals is just pure, and they
There are
don't
mathematical rules
much
that
have an
prove
own,
that a
let's say,
crystal
quality,
from the
but
smallest
they more
molecule
function as
up
an
to
amplifier, as an
full-grown
antenna. So basically,
meter-sized
a rock
crystals
crystal
follow
is
the
whatever
same
you put in,
geometric
he will just
pattern.
amplify it
In
and give it
mineralogy,
back
this
out.
is called a crystal
So it's
lattice
quite different
structure.
from other sort of crystals or gems. Here are some of the molecular structures of different crystals. And also, by the way, I think you just mentioned it, that crystal, the term crystal, is just about how molecules or atoms are brought together on this level. So basically, you can have different materials that crystallize, that are crystals. For example, even sugar or salt is a form of
The crystal is
crystallization.
composed of smaller tetrahedrons, that is, silicon and oxygen formed in the shape of the tetrahedron, which is a four-sided pyramid.
So he is explaining the atomic structure of the rock crystal.
And millions of these tetrahedrons form a spiral shape and go
And also
internally
these
to the crystal
illustrations that I
to the
found. Oh,
tip
this
of
one
the
is super
crystal.
interesting because that looks like
The
a
energy
double
flows along
helix.
these
Almost
tunnels in
reminds
the
a little bit
rock
of a
crystal.
DNA structure. I found that really fascinating, and a lot of these structures come together and they form this crystal lattice.
Large
And
computer companies
these
that have
illustrations you
researched
saw, I
crystals
got
for
this
many
from a
years
chemist.
have
He's a
proven
professor at the
that this
university in
crystal
Aachen
lattice structure
in Germany,
actually has
and
the
he's
same
in the
function
chemistry
as an
department,
antenna.
and he has been
Hewlett
showing
Packard,
me. I mean, he's
ITT,
like very
Bob Lorentz,
scientific on
all
things,
the big
but he has
computer
given me
companies
this
did
software
years of
which
crystal
visualizes
research,
how
where they
the
found, for
molecules in
example,
atoms
that
look
crystals
or
have
form
an
together
electrical
on
and
the
optical
atomic level.
axis, which is often or usually
And
in
here
the
you can see
direction
some
of their
shots
growth
from also from the museum,
that
how
is, in the
crystals are
direction
actually
of its
used
tip.
in
A
different
growing crystal
technological
has an
devices.
antenna function, and thus a capability of transmitting and receiving energy pulses that a fragment of a mineral or a tumble-polished stone or a non-crystalline formed mineral does not have.
Yeah, and this is also, I think,
Concerning the
a very
internal structure of the
interesting
rock
information
crystal,
because
that is, for example,
naturally
piezoelectric,
grown crystals,
which
they really have
means
this
pressure
axis.
creates a primary electric
And if
field
you have some
around the crystal.
gems that are,
The
let's
special
say,
property
not
of the rock
crystally
crystal
grown,
is
or
the
that have
internal
a different
arrangement,
structure, they
the
do not have an
molecular
axis. They
structure.
do not have this
This
properties that
structure,
a rock
the
crystal
way the
have.
molecules are
And
arranged
also
in rock
interestingly,
crystal,
sometimes
creates
when you
an
see
optimal flow of
grinded,
information
cut,
and
and
energy.
polished stones, they look like a rock crystal, but they're just cut out from a
Let
bigger
us
piece,
again
so they don't
return
have
to
the
the
properties.
computers.
They don't have the
As I said,
axis that a
no
naturally grown
computer
crystal
today
has.
could function
They're just
anymore
like cut into a
without
form, but
quartz
they don't have
chips.
the
No
properties.
traffic lights, no
So
cars,
basically, when
no
when
aircraft.
when
Our
people
entire
go and buy
technology depends on the
a piece
quartz
of
technology.
rock
One should
crystal with a
therefore
certain,
actually
let's say,
talk about
function
the
that we
crystal
want to use,
age
like an
in which we live,
amplifier, it's
in a
very
way
important to
as
pay
in the
attention
Iron
that this
Age,
crystal
when
is
everything
naturally
was
grown
dependent
and
upon
they're
iron.
not cut or change in their axis.
We live in what we call the information age, and that includes that we are aware on several levels of the dynamics of information, what it does in people. Spiritually, we become more conscious of the thought forms we send
Mm.
out,
And I think this is also a
including
very interesting
feelings and
point.
emotions,
It is actually that
that these have a
we
direct
as
impact
humans,
on
we
our
are
own
in a
energetic being,
holistic process
but
of
also on the
evolving,
condition
of
of others.
development, and within that context, crystals can play a role and can be a support. And it's all about becoming more aware of
Well, to put it simply, the quartz
information
chips do
fields
nothing
of,
other
let's
than
say,
bundle
different
information
vibration
and
frequencies
enhance the
that
clocking and
we
transmission
are
of it.
getting in touch
This is the
with,
main
but that
capability of
also we are
quartz,
generating within
and
ourselves.
that's what
And
all
I think
kinds of healers make
that's a
use of
process
as
of
healing tools.
becoming more aware of things. And crystals are really a teacher,
As
or they
such,
can be a
a
helper
crystal
on
has
that
the
process
property to emit
of awareness.
energy and to receive it. It is the sender and the receiver. It has the capacity to transport energy from one level to another. That is, if I put thought energy and thought pulses into a crystal, then it brings them into a measurable electromagnetic spectrum.
All right, so now we're coming to the chapter about this guy, Lucas, who you saw earlier in his workshop. This guy is living in Switzerland, and he's like the mad professor. He's like the mad inventor. He's building these crystal devices. They're just like crazy. They look like some devices from a science fiction movie or something. And he has been learning from his teacher. I forgot his name, but he's very much into this knowledge about crystal fields. Basically, that you have different crystals and you can form different functions when you put them into certain patterns, how to amplify them, how to put them in different shapes, in different constellations, and then create different energy functions. And he uses that to influence entire buildings, entire spaces, entire rooms. And in his at his home, he has a praxis, which you can see, and that's basically the treatment room. That room is really crazy, and that looks really like, I don't know, some sort of science fiction device. And when he does the healing sessions, the client is laying on the bed below it, and then he would activate different programs to conduct or to amplify through this huge device. So basically, the whole room is like a device, and he can use that whole thing to change the field within that room and on the bed. These are some of his drawings. He made a bunch of cards to visualize a different flow of energies.
And secondly, I can cut them, of course. I can facet them and therefore let them radiate energy very specifically.
Here he is sharing his knowledge on how cutting and grinding crystals can basically create different tools for different usage. And he basically has been learning all this, studying all this, and then he created his own workshop to actually make all these devices and crystals himself. So it's quite an interesting experience just to watch him do all this.
And that is also the knowledge that is inside the healing devices.
That's one of his devices. He has a bunch of them at his place. Each one with a different function, and he's also building them for clients, for people who want to buy, people who are working with subtle energies, but who also do not only work with people, but also with entire spaces.
If you now want to use them for energy balancing, or indeed for development, that we begin to control our reactions, and that we take our behavior into our own hands.
So here we're going to the next chapter, and this is about Donald Jaskolla.
Donald Freeman Jaskolla is an international trainer for working with Vogelcut crystals. These crystals distinguish themselves through the exclusive purity and very precise cut. Their facets with precisely calculated angles greatly enhance their national ability to receive, store, and
the whole
release
topic about
information.
Vogelcut crystals, I never heard about this
What has come through to me about
until,
rock
of course, we got
crystal
into the
is
research
based
of
mostly on
the whole movie.
findings of an American scientist,
And
mystic,
here, Donald,
his name
he's been a
was
student
Marcel
of this
Vogel.
guy, Marcel Vogel,
Vogel
and he
was
seems to
someone
be,
who
I mean,
worked for
Marcel Vogel,
27
I've
years
heard
at
of him
IBM,
later in
who
different
did a lot of
contexts, and he
liquid
seemed to be
crystal
really
research,
an
and who was spiritually
interesting
inclined and
person,
mystical.
and the work he has done
He
was
brought
tremendously
together
important.
spiritual
He's
and
been,
scientific
in
knowledge
IBM,
in a unique way,
and he has
and
been doing
explained the
a
properties
lot
of rock
of the
crystal in
research and
detail.
also inventions through the research of crystals and liquid crystals. And he has been bringing all his knowledge together. And these Vogelcut crystals are
Marcel Vogel
some
developed
super
a special
specialized
type of crystal.
tools.
I want to show such a crystal that has been cut into
Here
this form,
he's explaining
unlike
the
a
difference between
conventional
a
uncut
normal
crystal.
grown crystal and
The properties of the rock crystal are optimized in a so-called Vogel cut crystal.
in the Vogelcut crystal. It's really amazing.
The rock crystal as transmitter and receiver, the way
Well,
it
this
comes
is
out of the
kind of
rock
an animation
is like a
to
radio
illustrate,
signal,
how
which
the
has not been
energies
adjusted
could look
properly.
like when they are
There
made
is a
visible.
great addition of noise, and the actual
So
information
that was
signal
basically a
cannot
natural
be
crystal, which
accurately
was
transferred.
has a lot of
To
noise,
offset this
so to
disadvantage,
speak.
he has developed the so-called Vogel cut crystals. They are cut in such a way that they make the
Compared to a
transfer of a precise
Vogelcut
signal
crystal
possible.
that has
They are
been
made so that they send
cut
out
and
a
grinded
coherent signal
to
that
optimize the
is an
flow
equally oscillating
of energy.
electrical impulse, and that makes them unique in their use for healing work.
Und das macht sie in ihren Möglichkeiten der Heilarbeit einzigartig. Dieser Bergkristall ist in einer
This rock crystal has been cut into an 8-sided form, and it has been discovered that the more sides, the more facets such a crystal has, the stronger the spin of energy and inner reflection, and the more stronger the output of energy
And all
is
these
from
crystals you
such a
see here
crystal.
are Vogelcut crystals. So he has quite a collection, and he's using them. But also, funnily, he's one of the few trainers I know that are
Vogel-cut
really
crystals
were
are different from
studying
normal
and
rhinestones
has
and
a
most polished crystals
certificate to
in that they are
actually
cut exactly
use and
and
also teach
precisely
how
in
to
their angles.
use the Vogelcut
They are
crystals.
cut
It's a
along the
very
growth axis,
very
and they
special
must
tool, I
be,
would say.
and that makes a
But at the
Vogel-cut
same time,
crystal
I mean, he has
in
such a
exact
tremendous
resonance
knowledge,
to the
and
vibration of
he's
water.
just very
Water has a
heartly
specific
person, and he's
frequency
also
as
working
measured
a
on
lot
a
with
radionics device.
other energies,
The
other
rock
methods.
crystal is
So
cut
basically,
so
one
that it
of
comes
the
into the
tools
same
that he's using
frequency.
are the Vogelcut crystals.
If both match exactly, it is called a Vogel-cut crystal. There are only
Yeah.
2 grinders in the world
So now he's
who
been
have the
explaining
ability to do
like
that.
what it needs to
Many of the
create a
crystals
Vogelcut
which you
crystals.
can find
That it
on
has
markets
to have a
or
certain
at
frequency.
gemstone dealers
And there
that
are just
imitate
2
this
grinders in
form
the
have
world that
nothing
can
to
do
do
this.
with
And
a Vogel-cut
of course,
crystal,
people
you need
wonder
to
like,
know.
who are these 2 people
This is very
who can
special,
do this?
one might say,
And I have to say, I
highly
don't
tuned
know.
tool
I know
for
where to
therapists
find that out
or
because
for
I was on a
people who do
website
energy work.
where these real Vogelcut crystals, they can be seen, they can be
Der
ordered, they can
ursprüngliche
be bought.
Vogelcut-Kristall
They're
hatte
not
4
cheap, they're
Seiten.
actually very expensive.
Inzwischen
The
But
original
this
Vogel-cut
way you can really
crystals
tell
had
the
4
difference
sides.
between a real Vogelcut
Now
crystal
there
or
are
a fake
Vogel-cut
one, because
crystal
a fake one
variations with more
is
facets,
quite cheap, but they
6,
don't have the
8,
properties. They
12,
just
and
look
odd
like it,
numbers.
but they don't have their
The higher the
energetic
number of
properties.
facets, the greater
And
the
if people
energy
really
is
want to find
reflected
out,
in the crystal itself
um,
and amplified.
where to
simplify.
get the real
That
ones,
does not mean that the more facets, the better
and
the
who
crystal.
the two grinders are who
But
do
each
that.
crystal has its
I
own
can
special
advise again
preferred
to look on their
application.
website, because you find a link to this guy's
Anyway, it is a
website,
fallacy in male thinking
Donald
to
Jaskolla.
always think the stronger the better,
He's been also
especially when
studying
working with simple
with
energy.
someone from
You'll
the
learn
US. I've
very
also forgot his
quickly
name.
that a precise but also gentle
And
pulse
they are the
with the
ones
correct information
producing and
vibration
selling
is much more
the real
effective
Fogelcut
than any
crystals. So you can
strong,
find the links if
overwhelming
you're really
energy.
interested to find that
als
out.
irgendwelche starken, überwältigenden Energien. Die Erkenntnisse, die zum Beispiel Marcel Vogel über die Bergkristalle
The findings that, for example, were formulated by Marcel
So here he's
Vogel
talking
on
about the
quartz
relationship
crystals and their
between
possible
water
application in
crystals
relation to the structuring of
and also
water or the like
the crystalline
are
structure
all
of water.
based on
Actually,
the
when it
findings and
freezes, that
development
it has the
that
exact
goes with the
same
information
crystalline
age.
structure
One of
as
the
rock crystal.
approaches to work with the crystal is to use its capacity similar to how we use computers, though perhaps with a little more dedication. And that's the interesting thing about the crystal, that it calls and asks us also to very respectfully deal with all levels of creation.
Yeah.
sehr respektvoll mit allen Ebenen der Schöpfung umzugehen.
And also this, I find it very interesting that,
If
we've
gems
been
and
interviewing
crystals have
these
such
different
an effect on the
experts,
human energy body,
and
namely that their
even though they are very
vibrational
different,
quality
in
and
their
the
work
energy
fields,
of
some
intention
of
can be
their
transferred
core
as
messages are
information to
really
a
the
living
same.
being, then the
And
question
it's really
arises
about,
if this effect can
becoming
be
more
proven or
aware
even
about
measured.
how we relate with life in general. Of course, with crystals, but also what
The effects of
we can
stones are
learn
directly
how to relate
detectable. There
with
are,
different
for
beings
example,
with more respect.
biofeedback devices that
So
show
it's really
immediately
fascinating to
how,
see
through the
also
effects of
that
a
they come
stone,
to similar
changes in the body
conclusions in a
appear.
very personal way.
Dieses Biofeedback
All right, so
Gerät
now we're going
funktioniert.
into the
This biofeedback device
chapter
works
that's
with the skin resistance measurement.
for the science
Due to the
people,
specific skin resistance
because
measurement
here we're
values are
trying to
obtained,
actually
which are stored in the
see if
computer.
we can measure all
The
these
device
effects.
displays the
So
energy
the
or
first thing we
aura
did
image
was with a
of the most
geologist again.
important
That's at his
organs
home. He has a
that are
little
also found in the reflex
praxis,
zones of the hand,
and he
visible on
has
this
one of his
graphic.
devices. It's
All
called a
of this is much
biofeedback
inspired
device,
by traditional
and
Chinese medicine.
I think it
Ganze
measures the
lehnt sich
electrical
stark
resistance of
an
the skin,
traditionelle chinesische
and it
Medizin.
does so on the hand. And in relation
Also
with
eine
the
Messung
reflex zones of the
läuft
hand, you
folgendermaßen
can
ab.
basically get an
The
impression
measurement procedure is
of
as
of
follows.
the different parts of your body.
The subject places his hand on a board with 40
And
pins.
as said, I'm not an expert
At
on
first,
this,
the
but
current state
what
of
you
the
can
person
clearly
is
see is
measured.
that there are some measurements,
Then we
like you can
analyze
see
the
on the
measurement.
screen. And every time the
Dann
client, in this
analysiert
case this
man
woman, every
die
time when she
Messung.
was taking a
Der
different
zweite
stone
Schritt
onto her
wäre,
hand,
dass man aufgrund
The
the
second step
the
would be
measurements
to
changes
select a
immediately.
particular stone
So you can
based on the analysis and
see that
place
in
it
real
in this
time that
person's
things
hand.
change.
The moment when the stone
And of
touches the
course,
skin, the
what
picture
change, how
changes.
strong, and a lot of that is more to interpret from experience to see,
der
okay,
Ist-Zustand.
what makes more
The
sense,
person's
and
state has changed
which
considerably,
crystal is
as
more
can be seen
suitable.
here. There is a
But
lot
you
more
definitely
energy
can
in the
see
body
that
now. Here at
different
the bottom of the graphic,
gemstones
the
also
neck,
have a
the
different
elbow,
effect,
and so forth.
and you can see that in
Previously,
real
it
time.
was
So
relatively low.
it was really, I mean, I was really fascinated by this device, and
Ist sozusagen
I
der
asked him if I
Beweis,
could do some
So
tests,
this is the evidence that due to the
basically
characteristics of the stone,
without
the
gemstones,
condition
like
of
if you can
individual organs,
just
or
measure your
possibly
own
the mood of the whole person,
your own
the whole
state in
body
your body.
changes.
And for example,
ganzen
what if you
Person
just
des ganzen Körpers
do
ändert.
an exercise, like a breathing exercise, or do
Ganz
something
wichtige
else? Can you
Aussage der
see if there are
traditionellen
A
changes?
very important
And
statement of traditional
when we
Chinese
were doing
medicine
this test, you
is
could
that
see
every
the changes
disease
in real
has a
time. So it
spiritual
was really
cause.
fascinating.
This has been confirmed in a very, very large number of measurements. If, for example, the energy or aura picture changes and only turquoise, green, and blue colors are shown, then you can assume that everything has changed for the better.
Alles zum Positiven
And
verändert.
I know that today these devices have been, improved, and there are different brands now creating these devices, and you can get them on the
This is not
market.
only possible with methods, and instruments can only be a tool. Ultimately, this
Yeah,
requires
and what
real know-how
Michael
and
Ginga just said
consciousness of
was
the
completely
user.
clear, that devices can be helpful, but in the end,
An extensive
it still needs
experimental
someone
setup is needed
experienced to
to
really
measure the field
find out
changes
the
that
right
occur
stones.
by installing crystal energy devices. The
All right, so
biophysicist
here we get into
Dr.
the
Walter
second part
Miller has been
of
researching the
the
effect of
measurement,
electromagnetic fields in
measuring.
humans for
And
many
this
years.
part is much more,
The
I would say,
instruments he has
sophisticated,
built
because
specifically
the
for this
physicist,
purpose
he has been
are
bringing
able
his
to measure
device,
very fine
and we've been
electromagnetic
setting
fields.
up the whole experiment in the treatment room of Lucas,
We have
of
fetched
him.
the technician to
So,
find out what
and
effects
basically we
magnetic
brought these two
frequencies
people
have on the
together,
human
and they were
system.
both totally
That was the
thrilled,
reason why
because
we
the
brought the
physicist,
technician to see if it's
the Lucas,
measurable,
he said, "Oh, I've been doing
whether
this for
that which
years,
is
and I really
perceptible
want
to
to
humans
know
can
if
also be measured,
this can actually
and
be
also to
measured
read
by
from the
some
data
device that we
collected
have today."
what crystals do
And the physicist,
and
when he
how and
arrived,
in
he was
which
just
direction
looking at
we
this
can
room
investigate
and at
further.
this installation. He was like, "Wow, I always wished I could come to such a place and take some measurements." So it was
I
really
have
fun
used the grid method
to bring
for
these two
measuring the
together.
magnetic flux density. This is the
And
size
so
in which
basically, we
you
have been
eventually
setting up
measure
the
the strength
whole
of the magnetic field. The measurement
measuring,
is made
let's
for
say,
the vertical
experiment
component of the
in
magnetic
that room
field.
with this
The
big
goal
crystal
is not
device
to capture the
to
full
see
magnitude of the field in all
what
three
changes.
directions, but the
And
structure of
here
the
he's
field.
explaining in a very
For the
scientific
measurement
way
in one
actually
direction,
what he's
because
measuring.
the measurement values can
And
change
from what I
when the
understand,
magnetic
and maybe in
field
simple
changes
words, is
direction.
basically he's
Even if it
measuring the
maintains
magnetic
its strength,
field,
its
but
total
not
field
the
intensity.
strength of the magnetic field,
The
but the
device which is
motion,
used
the
for such
structure.
measurements is
So
called the
basically, in the
Tesla
moment
meter.
when,
The
let's say,
Tesla is namely the
this
unit
device
of
gets
magnetic
activated,
flux density.
you cannot
This is a
actually
very large unit.
measure that
We usually
the
measure a
amplitude changes.
microtesla
The amplitude may stay the
because
same,
the strength
but the
of the natural
structure of the
magnetic
magnetic field
field
changes.
in the direction of measurement in Central Europe is about 40 microtesla. The value fluctuations and the natural variations of the geomagnetic field are in the range of tenths of microtesla. If
So
we can
basically, we
detect
have been setting
effects
up
that go significantly
different
higher,
situations,
then we
and
say
he has
they
been
are
taking
significant.
the measurements one after the other with his device. And he,
If
he
we
was
can
doing
see
kind of a
significant
grid,
effects,
and he was
then we
measuring
can
every
show
point of that
changes
grid, and
in the
then he could
structure of the
calculate the
magnetic
difference
field
on the
on the
computer.
basis of these fine readings.
And I was
The
thinking,
total
like,
energy of the
that's
magnetic
really
field
amazing. I mean, this
remains
is really
approximately the same, but it
the
is
way,
distributed
to have
differently.
some proofs. And
That's what our
you can see
measurements
on the
should
computer
show in this
that there are
case,
very clear
and
differences.
what would be enough to
And
prove
I was
a Healy
thinking
effect
it would be so
in the sense
amazing
of
if you
life
could, I
energy.
don't know, somehow create a device that does what he is doing here manually, but more automated, and taking a measurement of the whole grid and in real time, so you can
In this
basically have a
experiment,
similar effect
the
as the
magnetic field
biofeedback
measurement
device
was
previously,
used as a
but
tool
you don't
to
measure
determine whether the
just one
healing
person,
table,
but you can actually
especially
measure
when
the
activated by
structure
the
of the
healer,
magnetic field
has
in a whole
changed
room.
the field somewhat. The magnetic field is indeed primarily a field of order, so with this field we have the best chances of getting physical, objective evidence of such changes.
Objektiven Nachweis solcher Veränderungen im Raumfeld zu bekommen.
If you approach such a goal in a technical way, you must
Yeah,
first
so he's
determine the background.
explaining
That is,
how he
which
did the
magnetic
measurements,
field
and he has been
conditions
very,
are present
very
in the room
delicate
itself.
to start out with some measurements of the room without anything active, without clients, to get a picture of how the magnetic field looks like when nothing happens. And then he
Made
would
a
make
further series of
measurement of
measurements a
each
little
different
above the
state,
table,
when there's a
a
client, when
stretching
the
out and
program,
measuring
when the
sheet
device is
there,
active, and
whenever
then
a client was on the
calculate the
table.
differences to draw
So we could
conclusions.
then compare these values with the background measurements, with the magnetic field of the table without human influence.
Magnetfeld des Tisches ohne menschlichen Einfluss. Die Ergebnisse
The results provide a kind of map or terrain display, as seen here on the screen, with a three-dimensional representation. Here, the heights were combined to the measured values.
So basically, he's
Here, the
explaining
measured
now
values were
how
arranged
the
by
results of the measurements look like when you
height. In this
transpose them
case,
onto
we
a
see the
graphic on the
measurement,
computer screen.
which was made on the ground.
And you can
You
see the
that
different
field is quite
states
There
and the
are
differences.
relatively severely fluctuating values. The next display shows the field as we measured it on the measuring table. It is much more balanced.
So basically,
Which
what
shows
he's
that the
explaining is that
installation in
just
itself
the
provides
table
a
on
good
which a client
balance
is
of the
lying
magnetic field
in the
values.
room, it harmonizes the whole magnetic field, make it very balanced,
Diese Situation wurde ebenso auf dem
and on the table.
This situation has also been measured on the table in the presence of the energy worker who has activated a certain energy program. We see that the field is still pretty balanced, but there are small differences to the previous image. To make it clearer, I use the difference of the measured values between the two previously described situations.
zwischen den beiden vorher erläuterten Situationen aus. Die Differenz
So now he's talking about
ergibt
basically
dann
the
den
difference
Effekt,
when he
The
the measurement
effect that
between
is
how the
caused
room looks like
by
when it's
activation
balanced
of the
and
energy
how the room
program.
looks like when
We
the
see in
energy
this
device
chart
is
a
being
structured
activated.
effect.
And the difference
Upon
shows
close
kind of a
inspection,
structure in the
you can
field
see a kind of
that he
grid
says
line,
is
especially in two
basically
opposite
remembering of the
directions.
magnetic field at
These are
power
reminiscent
points
of the magnetic
that
field
he has been
structure,
measuring at different
as
power
they are
points.
found on well-known energy spots, places where people feel special bioenergetic effects and where healings occur.
energetische Wirkungen verspüren und wo auch Heilungen vorkommen. Damit konnten wir objektiv
This enabled us to objectively provide evidence.
And I would say, from this measurement, from this experiment, we could clearly see that this whole process, the device, and also the activation through the healer, in this case him, Lucas, has a direct effect on the structural field of the magnetic field in the room. And I think anything else is basically experience, interpretation, and especially from someone like him who works with it, basically who from experience knows what to do for a specific person in a specific situation. So
as the one who directs the energy.
In dem Vorgang auch sichtbar wird als der die Energie leitet.
Such measured results are still the exception, though.
I think the development of science and technology in the modern world and modern spirituality, especially spirituality, has learned from technology or science, precisely because these findings, which have been made to the smallest scale, down to the atom and even further, as well as to the largest scale, that is, into space, how our universe is structured, are something that
the three states of not the three states, the three ways of illustrating an atom.
Although there have been more and more scientists, starting from Max Planck, who noticed that the more they investigate,
here are some shots from my fractals.
that things are not only material,
I'm a huge fractal fan, so I've been doing all these fractal animations, and they were just fitting with what Michael is saying here.
But these people are few, because they must go against their own doctrine of science and are often treated with hostility or even dismissed as crackpots.
I think he's making a very good point here, about this, let's say, rivalry between spirituality and science, and how he wishes that it should really learn from each other and go more hand in hand.
Is easier than vice versa.
Die klassische Naturwissenschaft hat
Classical science has no answer to the question of why such effects are healing or energizing. In reality, we now certainly have explanations for these phenomena.
Haben wir heute durchaus Erklärungsansätze für diese Phänomene. Die wissenschaftlichen Denker, die am weitesten
And also
vorangekommen
here,
sind,
he's basically
auf
speaking
ihrem
about the
The
same thing.
scientific thinkers who have made the most progress
It's
just
about,
as
also
quantum physics
how
have not
especially
met
scientists,
these
like
barriers
very
that the field of
famous
physics
scientists, they
has
have
shown
come to a
us.
point where,
These are the
they
smallest
when they cross the
scales,
border
the
of
so-called
their,
Planck scale,
understanding, they have to realize
as it
there
is
is
called
something
in
like
physics.
spiritual
One
reality.
cannot go
But the
below
moment
this
when
scale
they
with
actually,
physical means,
utter that,
but
they
we know
are
today that there
against
is
their
a
own
reality
own field
beyond
of
these
science. So
barriers. Leading thinkers describe something beyond that being the range of spirit.
and I think the whole, this whole topic started actually when when science first emerged. It was something about objectivity. It was about rationalism. It was also emerging as let's say a reaction against doctrines, against religious doctrines. So like in the Middle Ages, I would say there was a lot of very stuck structure, especially in the religious way. So people who started to use their own analytical ways, thoughts, they just started to think for themselves. And I think at that time it was really a great thing to happen. So the scientific method, science has been starting. But what I think happened during the time afterwards is that science has brought so many, let's say, positive changes and insights and inventions that today it's for some people kind of become another god or religion. It's basically when science says that, then it's true or it's good. I believe that, even they don't know, but when scientists say that, then yeah, and it's true. So I think it has to be taken a step further to say that definitely science has to be there, especially also the logic, the rationality, and the scientific method behind there. It's really good. And we need that to verify or to falsify things. But at the same time, we have to expand our understanding or horizon once more, and to see that there are some things that we might not understand, we might not even understand today, we might not be able to measure yet, but they're still there, and they have an impact, they have an effect on us and our lives. So I think this whole quest is really about finding out the truth, and also to see that in the different religions that we have or spiritual traditions, there's always something in it that is true, or some information, some core truth that's actually valid or valuable. And I think it's more about how to more complete, make our worldview more complete, including the scientific way and the spiritual way.
And a wonderful example of this kind that nature offers us are crystals. We also know that water is purified during its natural path through the ground, through its contact with minerals, crystals, and becomes structured thereby also. Rock crystal has a lot of similarities with the element of water. Water, when it freezes, takes on the same hexagonal shape that we know as a snowflake.
Here they're talking again about the role of water, the importance of water, and also how that water has different qualities, can be a carrier of informations, and how, for example, crystals and gemstone can actually have an impact on the quality of water.
Crystals by Emoto or the drop image method by Ruth Kubler show that water actually changes qualitatively without any substances brought into the water, but only by the information which the water has absorbed.
To think of gems and crystals only as tools for harmonizing human condition, though, would be a disservice to realizing the true potential
So
of both
here
the
it's
stones and
basically
humans.
more about, let's have a look about gemstones and crystals when they're not
Beyond their healing
used
power,
as,
crystals are
healing tools for
absolutely
human
justified
beings.
or can be of help. Basically, we can say that if we are doing
And
fine,
what
if we
Michael Ginga
feel
is saying is
normal,
here
then
that
there
sure,
still is much
we
to
we
learn.
it's not just
Basically,
when we're
stones can
sick
help to acquire
or
skills.
when we
If
have
you want
some
to train
problems that we
something
turn
specific, if you want to learn
to
something, this
whatever,
can be from
be it
learning to
a
play an
shrine or
instrument
a crystal
through to
or just
expanding
to
your own
seek for
awareness.
some help.
Their crystals
But
can
actually,
provide a useful
especially
support.
crystals can be
Meine persönliche
how,
Erfahrung ist,
what kind of
dass
influence
Kristalle
can
im
they have on
Besonderen
us,
My
positive ones,
personal
when we're
experience
not
is
sick,
that crystals
when we
in
do not have a
particular
problem?
promote the development of humans energetically and accelerate them. It goes along with the change of consciousness, with the change in the awareness that more and more people are opening up to the subtle levels of perception. And since the crystals are highly experienceable at these levels, people are opening up to crystals and their properties.
öffnen sich die Menschen auch für die Kristalle und deren Eigenschaften.
Consequently, we can use healing crystals not only for physical healing purposes, but they should primarily be used for emotional
These shots are
stability
made at his
and
place,
above all to support
Wolfgang Hall.
spiritual development.
So the last
They
chapter is
are
dedicated
wonderful
to
healing
him and his
crystals
work.
that act
We'll
as
come to that in a
spiritual
minute.
catalyzers with whom we
But
can
it's
go
it's
through
an amazing
processes
place that he
very
has built.
quickly, for which you previously had to do years of therapy. That, to me, is really the main advantage in using crystals, that we have in our spiritual work great helpers and tools that facilitate and accelerate the work.
Mir erschien es immer so, dass die Kristalle uns, und das lässt sich schwer beweisen, sondern nur
To
beobachten,
me, it always appeared that crystals, and that is difficult to prove, but can only be observed, encourage us in the development of our subtle awareness possibilities.
in die Lage
That
versetzt,
through the crystals, our consciousness is enabled to perceive beyond the normal spectrum of awareness.
das heißt, Kristalle sind
Crystals are helpers on our path. They are not, I would say, something that magically gives us consciousness.
Absolutely, and this is also a point that I feel that some people misunderstand, because when they, when there's talk about crystals having different energies or powers, it's not like crystals have
From the
some
viewpoint
sort of
spiritual
magical
development,
powers.
the crystals, the healing
They have a
stones,
vibration
are
like
for me
almost any
personally
kind of
the strongest
substance,
tool to grow a
but
divine
crystals and
consciousness, to
gemstones, they have a
mature.
very specific kind of
What all
vibration,
religions speak of as
pulsing,
the goal,
and
namely
the
unity
moment when you are
consciousness.
getting in touch with this, let's say, this quality, and it also enters in your own field of your body, it will have a direct effect. And the way how we basically react to the effect of the different crystals is what we
A
experience,
developing awareness
is what we take
that
as an experience.
recognize the same spiritual foundation in everything will
And I can say
easily
for
help to
myself,
include the
I had
crystals
some
as
experience
part
with
of a
crystals. I didn't
conscious
have
mind.
this, like very big life-changing kind of experience. I didn't have that, but I clearly can remember, for
So I
example, I
both
had
use
very
stones as life
very
forms. If you view
clear
the time in a
experience with
geological
rock
scale
crystals.
and begin to think in millions of years, you'll see that even in the realm of stones there are developments. That stones are born from the depths of the earth, and that they have their period in which they exist at the surface, and then pass away again, are dissolved and reformed into other rocks. For me, these are also life processes that we as people do not normally notice. If you consider this dimension, then certainly also
Here are
communication
also again some
between man
shots
and
from
stone
the
can
museum,
happen.
and they have some amazing pieces of crystals and stone there.
Entering into a stone circle of earthkeeper crystals, We can recognize their effect on their immediate
So now we're
surroundings
into the last
as
chapter, and
carriers
this
of a
is
specific consciousness.
really a very special
Over
place
the years, Wolfgang
and the
Hall,
special works that
visionary and
Wolfgang
spiritual
Hall has
teacher,
done.
has collected many impressively large crystals.
And you know, many people have been asking, like, what is this place? I want to go there. So this place is pretty much in the middle of Germany, and it's called the Center of the Earthkeeper Crystals. And here he's explaining, like, what does it mean, Earthkeeper Crystal, where does the name come from, and so on. But this is a place that people can visit. Just be sure that first you get in touch with Wolfgang, because all this place is basically in his private garden, and he really doesn't like when people just show up and think they can, you know, just walk around there. So, but he's glad to welcome people for a tour. You know, he's offering a tour at his place a few times a week, so everything can be arranged. And yeah, he's basically telling the story about how he got into this whole thing with the Earthkeeper crystals, and the whole place is just beautiful. And the crystals, the biggest of the crystals that he has is 1.80 meters, so it's really big. And he made a stone circle, like a stone circle of 8 crystals, and in the middle there's a huge rose quartz that you just saw in the shot. And here's a crystal, a spiral of stones. In the middle there's another of the Earthkeeper crystals. And also he has so many animals there.
25 years ago, when after a seminar in a meditation, I had a vision of the Earth Spirit. I heard in my mind at the same time a voice instructing me exactly and explaining that the future would be about me gathering so-called Earthkeeper crystals from around the world and to use them for Earth healing. That it was necessary to save these giant
So basically he's telling his story, like how he got into all this, and he has a very spiritual and also very personal approach to all this. And of course, for some people who, I mean, for some people it's hard to believe what he's been going through and the stories that he's telling, understandably. But he also said that even for himself it was hard to believe when all this started. That's why he was very resistant for many years to really do this. So basically he has been resisting to what he felt he had to do.
And in fact, on the same day when I arrived in Brazil, for the first time after a long time,
so here you see again the stone circle of the Earthkeeper, and that's the biggest crystal. You see, it's really the same size as him.
Now there are many interesting events to tell about them, but in summary, let me say that this was the first Earthkeeper crystal that came into my life, and that it took several days of negotiations in order to save this crystal from cutting and grinding. In the following years, hundreds of giant crystals were brought to me in mysterious ways and under the strangest circumstances, even in periods when I considered this more of a curse than a blessing, when I had to spend my time again and sacrificing all my money.
Yeah, so he has been telling us a few stories that it's really crazy the amount of money and work that he has been spending to build this place, and also, as he say, to save this big crystal from cutting. Because from what I understand, if people, if some of the miners, if they find these kind of big crystals, and they don't find some buyers like him who say, okay, I'm gonna take the whole thing, it can happen that these big crystals, they actually get cut. So they're cut in small pieces, they're manufactured, they're produced into, I don't know, jewelries or smaller pieces for sale. So he has a very different relationship with crystals, so he sees them as entities and not just some entities, but actually as Earthkeeper entities. So he has been really
Earthkeeper crystals,
dedicating and
perhaps
doing so much to
represent only 1%
save this
of the
big
amount
crystals
of
and
Earthkeeper
gathering
crystals
together at his
which were
place
brought to
and
me
creating
in the
this
last
place of
20 years.
this, how do you call it, a
Most
power
of them
place,
were
place of
passed on
healing.
to people in healing places, to private homes, to hospitals, to clinics, in order to unfold
And
their
he's
healing
doing
energy
gathering, I think,
and
every
to
summer
support people in their
with
spiritual
people
work.
who are connected with the crystals, or especially with the Earthkeeper crystals. And they would do some
But this whole
ceremonies, they
thing
would do
has to do
workshops,
with earth
seminars, so
healing
it's like a
becomes
3-day program.
understandable when
And
we
we've been
realize
there
that the ultimate
for one
earth
of these
healing
events,
is
and
only
it was
possible with
really
a
a
global shift in
great time,
consciousness.
great atmosphere.
What good is it if we plant trees and reforest when the next people go and cut them down again? Consequently, we can only really permanently save or heal the earth if there are more people who are committed to develop their awareness. And that is an essential task of the Earthkeeper crystals.
And I'm actually not sure how these things are still taking place, if they take place, in what form. But when people are interested, they certainly can find out also on his website. He has a website with all the programs, the workshops he offers, the events, and so on. And he also made basically a safe haven for these white deers. So it's really quite impressive.
Ultimately, this means that they will help us grow our consciousness. The whole world is speaking of a rise in consciousness, to the extent that we wake up eventually to a higher truth, namely the truth that we are all one, that we are all cells of a large body. The crystal entities have given me a very touching message, that they are not only the oldest beings and the first beings who were on Earth, but
I also find
that they
this,
will be
actually,
the
this
last ones to
message or this
leave. That it was their
imagination
duty
quite
to manifest
touching,
the
also
divine
again
light
quite
of the
mind-blowing,
universe
because
here on Earth.
if you see,
And they
if you
therefore
just put
had to
yourself in
emerge
a
as the
perspective
first
from a
here,
crystal,
had to get a
we
form,
humans were just like
and will pass
coming
away
and
at
going.
last,
They've been
when
here
all
like
is
a few
gone,
100 million
when
years
this
before,
earth, this
and
sun
they will
is
be here
remelted.
400
This
million
touched me
years
deeply
later.
to make
So,
myself aware of this.
who knows, maybe the whole human existence is just like a blink of an eye for them. Yeah, so basically that's the ending. And I mean, the amount of information that we have been learning through this project and just meeting all these experts was tremendous. Because all of them, they have a background of like 20, 30 years of experience, and they've been like compressing all this knowledge into a 1 to 2 hour interview. And it was just, for us as filmmakers, such an enriching journey to meet these people and to gather that information and put that into a form to present that and share that with the world. And also a word to this music, because some people were asking, wow, this music is beautiful. All this is made by friends. You will see in the credits and also on the website that all the music are done like, here you see from Julian Roth, the other is Kevin Bertrand, and some are from me. And also from Akasha Project, he's a German musician, and he's been basically turning different molecules and atoms into sound. And he has been doing that for the silicon sound, especially for this documentary. So yeah, there's really much more behind than what you see at first glance, so to speak. And if you want to listen to that song in particular, or listen to the other songs, you can just go again on a website. You can find all the songs there for free, all the information, links. So I guess that's it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Hope you liked it, and see you soon.